While Singapore is preparing for the worst of crises as it emerges from the pandemic amid global uncertainty, is investing in more capabilities across the public, private, people sectors to bounce back stronger from shocks and setbacks. Tan Si-hui with more on what the finance minister calls building collective resilience.
Major disruptions over the last 3 years, from Russia's invasion of Ukraine and Malaysia's chicken export ban. Singapore weathered these because it had enough stockpiles and diverse supply lines. It will continue to review strategies to fall back on during a crisis, but all this comes at a price.
For example, diversification means buying from multiple sources. But this also makes things more expensive because we are no longer buying only from the cheapest source. The stockpiles of food and essential items will require space and will need to be maintained. Even if a crisis does not materialize or is less severe than expected, such costs still need to be funded.
The country is also looking at ways to design more buildings with many uses for both peacetime and crises. This is being studied for major infrastructure projects like the Tuas Megaport and Changi Airport Terminal 5. For instance, right now, MRT stations can become public shelters during wartime emergencies. Being nimble also extends to the public service. Many officers took on various roles during the pandemic. Some were deployed to migrant workers' dormitories or helped with contact tracing. To better prepare them, more training and cross-deployments are in the works. Resilience also means tapping the private sector as well, and MPs agree.
For example, in the SAF, they do mobilize the civil resources for exercises. They'll use some of these commercial trucks, other facilities to help SAF be able to deploy for our defense and other uses. So we can use that kind of experience to kind of open up to even more commercial organization coming in to play their part to enhance our resiliency.
Still, there's no way to anticipate every scenario, and so saving up is crucial.
Ultimately, our reserves are our greatest insurance. They allow us to respond quickly to immediate needs in an emergency without compromising the focus on the longer term. They enable us to bounce back stronger, and if we were ever to be hit by a bigger calamity or disaster, our reserves will provide us the resources to rebuild Singapore.
Besides financial reserves, Mr. Wong says people are the most critical ingredient of national resilience. That's because Singaporeans who feel a collective ownership and responsibility will be able to withstand shocks better. So there will be more measures to help bring people together. To encourage giving, tax deductions for donations will be extended. Second, a scheme to encourage volunteerism will be enhanced. $1 billion more will also go to help social service agencies deliver care services for seniors, and $10 million to support self-help groups over the next 3 years. Salaries for the social service sector will also be raised.
So we do need to attract and retain good people so that they can do a good job. So I don't see why educators or community care assistants or therapists, psychologists, teachers and job coaches, for example, why they should be paid a lot less, or treated worse off just because they want to do good.
In the end, Mr. Wong says key to Singapore's success is the trust and solidarity as a nation. It's a view he shares with the country's founding leader, the late Lee Kuan Yew, who would have turned 100 this year.
Our efforts to strengthen our overall resilience must reflect the values that motivate us as a people and as a nation. We want a Singapore where we not only do the best for ourselves, but also help our fellow citizens succeed. And that is how we keep Singapore strong, resilient, and united.
And joining us tonight to break down these messages is Associate Professor Eugene Tan from the SMU School of Law. Good evening, Professor Tan. The Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister today said we need to work harder to enhance our overall productivity, to improve the quality of the workforce, to stay competitive in this new environment, as he put it. I mean, it's a repeated refrain to increase productivity, to work harder. But he also said it with this grim warning as well, which is that never mind COVID, there are other compelling reasons to stick together.
I think this emphasis on resilience, right, not just of the individual, but increasingly of society, right? So he calls it collective resilience. I think it comes from the pandemic, right? So the question of how well a society is able to bounce back, from a setback. And I think when we look at the budget, I think there's a recognition that there's only so much that fiscal resources can do. Money in many respects is an enabler, right? But it's really what society makes of, this fiscal resources, to build up, the ability to deal with whatever challenges may come our way. And the finance minister did point out, how the global environment has become less forgiving, of small economies like Singapore, right? The geopolitical tensions. So if we think that the pandemic is the worst thing that has struck us in recent years, I think the concern is that there will be others, and which will demand a lot from Singaporeans, not just in the individual capacities, but also how we respond together, as a society. So I think it's the recognition, that in a way Singapore has been able to recover relatively quickly because of the nimbleness, the adaptability, the trust and confidence that people have of the government, as well as, equally important, how people trust and have confidence in each other. So it's really this, horizontal and vertical trust and confidence that I think has enabled, Singapore to come out stronger. And I think here, the government is hoping to use the pandemic, as a lesson in which, we can be better prepared for whatever contingencies that may come our way in the years ahead.
But we assume budget, and it could be a wrong assumption, that the budget is supposed to give us a clean, clear, usable message as we go forward into a new era. Broad terms like resilience, which can cover everything from financial resilience, fiscal resilience, to personal resilience, collective societal resilience. How helpful are they? We all know we should be unified. We know we should think of others beyond ourselves. What really came out of this budget that gives us a new message to move forward?
I think when we look at the messaging, and of course there were several messages, right? But I think one is that, people can trust that they will have society at their backs, that there will be, this effort to ensure, that no one is left behind. And again, while we might say that there's a buzzword, I think it is also important to recognize that there is this conscious effort. I think there's a recognition that, if we're not careful about bringing people together, and because of the challenges of globalization has in a way brought more stratification to society, that there's a need to close all these gaps. We don't want two Singapores to develop. And so while money is a powerful enabler, we must recognize that it is not sufficient, right? Ultimately, is whether people believe, that this is a country in which they can sink their roots. This is a place where, their aspirations and their hopes can be fulfilled. This is a place where, they can live with dignity. So I think here we are moving away from material aspirations, to what has been described as post-material aspirations, right? So the idea that it's not just about material affluence, but people seek self-actualizations, self-fulfillment. They want to have a stake in this society. The questions of social justice and fairness, and I think we will see these themes coming out a lot stronger. In future budgets, there has been that growing accent, right? So in the past, we look at budgets that zero in on the economy, how we're doing, but I think now it's really more about the people's report card. How are we doing as a people?
Yeah, and not taking unity as a given, perhaps.
Definitely, yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. That was Associate Professor Eugene Tan there from SMU School of Law.